have our final session, which will include research and regulatory updates. We're going to break, and then the second half of the morning is going to be a bull kelp workshop. We are going to have to do a changeover at the break with the tables. So the back 6 tables are going to go away as we prep for lunch, and all of the tables are going to have new linen. So just be prepared at break that you might have to kind of push away from the table and take your stuff off. So for the bull kelp workshop, for those of you sitting in the very back, we're going to ask you to actually come forward and fill in some of the front table seats. We are going to have a great lunch, another lunch being catered by Breeze Inn, but we also have oysters that have been brought in for some of our Alaska farmers, and we have a chef. Chef Maile Chavez has come into Alaska to prep some seaweed dishes for us as well, so lunch should be really fantastic. Today, we're going to get started with our keynote presentation by Robert Venables and Juliana Leggett. They're going to talk to us about a great opportunity that is just getting started up for the state of Alaska, and that's on the Alaska Mariculture Cluster. So please join me in welcoming them.
Well, good morning. It's an exciting time to be in mariculture, isn't it? And what a great event that has been put together. Yesterday's, I don't know, here we go, try that. So yesterday's day was just crammed full of all kinds of great information, and we're just really pleased to be part of what's happening. And really, do I need to click to get started, or are you going to throw, I'll know you're catching up with me when it gets up there. Anyway, I'm Robert Venables. I'm the Executive Director for Southeast Conference, and really, what I'm most pleased about is just, I'm more the, am I waiting on, am I supposed to be doing something, or? I'm just going to keep talking until you guys catch up with me. And then there'll be a big picture there, and we'll know where we're going. Oh. Got to plug it in and turn it on. Okay. Anyway, so really pleased to be the conductor for the choreographer or the facilitator of this Alaska Mariculture Cluster. Obviously, it's a team effort. There's an internal team, there's an external team, there's a team of teams, and what this really is a great culmination of amazing teamwork that has happened over many years. The Alaska Mariculture Task Force that did the framework for the governor that outlined the scope of work to create a $100 million industry and led to the formation of AMA. Really, we got a lot of front chair musicians that have brought this effort together, but the passion, the work that you all bring really is the real story here. And so Southeast Conference is the Regional Economic Development Organization. Let's go back a few slides and start at the beginning. And in the beginning, there was a mariculture cluster. This is the new logo that we've got up there. We've got the two symbols there indicating the kelp and the shellfish, the lead species for our effort here, but a little bit about Southeast Conference itself, having been formed, and really because we've been in a working relationship. Partnerships is what we excel at. Started in 1958 with the regional partnerships. Our partnerships continue across the state. New planning, project development, and that relationship with EDA really is what I think helped provide the confidence, along with a stellar coalition that and a compelling proposal that leads us to today. And so one thing I wanted to really talk about too is part of that partnership that led to a $49 million award from EDA was also met by in-kind match, folks from the wildlife, the World Wildlife Fund. I know there's a couple of you here today, right? Are you in the room? There we are. There you go. So thank you. The Grantham Foundation, Seacoast, and the Denali Commission all provided sizable cash to help with the match. We've got some in-kind contributions from folks like the City of Valdez and the Chugach Regional Resources Commission and others that really have made this this project. It's a $64 million project that fits in well with our own mission to promote economic development that leads to, the strong economies, healthy communities in a healthy environment. The jobs, the equity, the environmental benefits of mariculture, you all know them very, very well. And our goal is really just to accelerate that, and that's the key word on this slide, if I'm doing it right. Yeah, wonderful. Is that we're really just accelerating what you're doing and supporting the AEMA's organization as the trade organization that will represent you sustainably going forward into the future. So as we go through the next few minutes, we're going to try to go through a lot of information really, really quick. But one of the things that we wanted to do is just to make sure that you understand the scope and the breadth of what this is. You see the little brochures here on the tables that kind of give a synopsis, and Juliana's going to run through that. I love this graphic. So our project area, of course, is all these. This is the 4 economic development districts. I don't think the others are here with us today. Oh no, Nick is here from Swampsea. So we've got both bookends covered from here, and trying to structure this so that it has that regional impact. But the scope of this is just really, really amazing. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Juliana, who is our project manager for this. Where's Kaid? Kaid, where's? There you are, standing up in the back as our project coordinator for this. Dan Lesh would have been here as well, but he is on personal leave, and we've got, strategically, we have employees that's stationed in part-time Valdez and one based out of Seward. So we're getting that regional representation for staffing this effort here. So Juliana will kind of run us through the content, but here we go.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Nice to be here with everyone today and share a little bit more about this project that will be supporting all of the work that you guys are already doing in the industry and see it advance. So this is a visual that kind of helps capture the whole project because it's pretty expansive and complicated. So I really like this slide to help kind of give a bigger picture. So like Robert said, it's the grant itself is about $49 million in EDA funds, and then another just shy of $15 million in cash in-kind match. There's 7 components involved in this project, and each of the components has several projects within it. So there's a lot housed in each of those 7 components, and then of those 7 components, we have about 13 different sub-award recipients who are implementing aspects of the project. So just to kind of give you a bigger picture. And then, the top got cut off there. So this is another visual tool to kind of get a picture of the project as a whole. So these are the 7 projects in the blue. We have the revolving loan fund, we have a governance coordination, outreach, workforce development, research and development, marketing, green energy, and equipment. And then below that, you can see the sub-award recipients that are involved with each of these projects. And then I'll just run through quickly each of the projects. The brochure that's on your tables kind of summarizes what's happening in the projects. They just pull out a few highlights. There's a lot more going on, but just as a kind of a brief overview. So in workforce development, we have the opportunity to get to work with the university, UAA in Prince William Sound. I know Amanda is here somewhere. There she is over there. She's doing some really exciting work over in the Prince William Sound area for the university. And then, of course, we're working with Ginny and with Missy at Sea Grant, helping stand up the MRTC with getting an executive director. We're also, their program is also going to be funding partially funding a food safety person that will help expand capacity for new product testing, which will be really important as we are trying to reach markets. And then, of course, UAS is also doing some more training. So there's a ton of things happening in this component for workforce development that we're really excited about partnering with the university on. Research and development. This is a really exciting project. Well, they're all exciting, but this one's really exciting. We're working with Fish and Game, who's going to be doing some seaweed genetic analysis so we can better understand what we're working with to make sure that we're matching our regulations in the best way possible, that they're flexible enough that we can continue to expand the industry, but also that we're being mindful and protecting our natural resources. So it's Kristen Gruenthal over here sitting at the table. She's working on some of that. We're really excited to have her. And then, of course, DNR. I'm not sure if there's anyone here from DNR, but Rob Carter at the Alaska Plant and Materials Center, he's going to be leading a project doing some R&D for seaweed, looking at some biochemical fertilizers and things like that. And then Julie Decker, who you all know at AFDF, is going to be doing several projects in this component, including doing some tissue analysis for seaweed to understand the components that we're working with to help with marketing, and also a lot of other opportunities like the Joint Innovation Fund that I think Julie mentioned yesterday, where we can really engage the industry on innovative projects that we can fund to advance the industry, partnering with the Alaska Shellfish Growers Association to keep planning and having these conferences every year, which is really exciting. And then there's, as you can see, there's a ton of different stuff going on in here. And then Southeast Conference is actually going to be overseeing a carbon sequestration feasibility study. Dan is not here today, but he's kind of taking lead on this project. And we just want to kind of ground truth what's out there right now in the carbon sequestration world and just make sure that Alaska is at least ready to participate in whatever way is tangible. Market development, we've talked a lot about the need for developing the market. We had a great presentation yesterday from ASME. At this time, ASME is not able to market for mariculture due to a legislative change that needs to happen. But in the meantime, we're hoping to build something that we could pass on then to an entity like ASME to help us with marketing. And so Southeast Conference is going to be issuing some contracts to do this work. And then we have the green energy component. This component is going to be overseen through Alaska Fisheries Development Foundation. This is in a kind of a longer-term goal of looking at the industry as it develops and how we can make it more efficient and kind of in a more green way, relying less on expensive energy uses and finding ways that we can be more cost-effective and efficient in the way that we're running farms and the way that we're processing, doing all those kinds of things. And so we'll be developing a best practices guide and doing some measurements with current farmers and kind of figuring out people's energy use and how we can help them be more efficient. And then finally, on this slide, on equipment and tech, this is the biggest pot of money. It's $26 million. Part of that is, or 10 million of that is in-kind match. But I've kind of pulled out here, there's about $9 million going towards actually purchasing equipment. So we have $4 million for nursery hatchery equipment that we are going to be able to purchase. Another $3 million in processing equipment. And then we are working with the Department of Environmental Conservation to purchase some really cool new equipment that's going to put Alaska on the cutting edge of doing PST testing and expand capacity to be able to test beyond just PSP. And I think Patryce is here somewhere in the room. There she is. She's going to be talking about that a little bit more. And we're all going to get really excited about the opportunity there. And I think that's about it. Robert's going to take over after this for a couple more slides. But I just wanted to say, kind of in context, so we were notified that we got the award in September. If any of you have worked with federal grants, you know there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of administrative stuff that has to happen. But I'm excited that we just sent out our subaward contract packets to all of the subaward recipients that you saw earlier. And once those documents are signed, then the EDA gives us a thumbs up and we can start getting the money flowing. It'll be on a reimbursement basis, so we're not just going to get $49 million, as cool as that would be. So everything's going to be on just on a reimbursement. But we're excited to get the project going, and we do have a website that's on the last slide where you can sign up to get updates on when contracts are going out or when programs are happening, so you can figure out how you can get involved in the project and just keep updated on what's happening. So I'll pass it back over to Robert to finish this out, and yeah, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Juliana. So the 7th project is the revolving loan fund, and what this is intended to do is a couple of things, but primarily is to fill the gaps. There is a number of funding opportunities that are out there. The state has them, other organizations have them, banks have them, but there's some niches where it's, as you know, it's hard to capitalize or collateralize some of the assets you're looking to finance. One example was the concrete anchors that were needed to anchor down some of the oyster farms. It's like there's no bank that wants to go repossess that. So, you know, we're working through the structure on how that's going to be, whether loan participation, loan guarantees, outright financing. But we're really pleased to have partnerships here to help guide that. We're in the process of hiring someone to help us with the structural setup there. But you know, one of the reasons why this is one of the last slides is because strategically the intent is to invest in our people first and then our projects. There are some projects that will be probably they'll be ready earlier than others, but for the most part we want to make sure that our workforce is ready, our project development is ready. We're going to probably do some pre-investment analysis to make sure that the project is ready for funding, and if the proposal is not quite ready, we're going to work with those individuals, and that's where Spruce Root really comes in really well to help with some of the training, working closely with the Native Conservancy as well, because each one of these projects has a goal for 50% of the funds, 25% being targeted towards underserved communities and 25% towards Alaska Natives, so that we're making sure that we meet the equity marks and giving opportunity to the rural communities and Alaskans that have first crack at developing their own resources. And to make sure that that happens, we're going to have an oversight governance body that will make sure that those goals are being met, make sure that the metrics are in place, and monitor accomplishments to see that happen. And so that's going to, the staff for those are going to be the 4 economic development districts and AMA, and then we'll have regional tribal representations as well, along with AFDF on their seats. So it's going to be a 13-member governance body that will meet and keep an eye on this going forward. So it's kind of a race through this. A lot of this information has been out there. But we wanted to make sure we got it on the record for this group, and then allow for some time for some questions. You know, there's the mission for the EMC, and you know, one of the things that you notice that there's some named partners and there's some named projects, but for the most part, one of the reasons why we did not in advance. Some people ask, well, why don't you know how many of this or that you're going to invest in, or what equipment you're going to put where? Is because in order to meet the real needs of the rural communities and the tribal partners, they have a different process for evaluating priorities and investments, and we did not want to presume in whatever 90-day time frame or 180-day time frame that the East Coast politicians gave us to put this project together. We wanted to allow for that time to take place. So we've got a lot of process will go into this. So if someone's looking for a check next week, it's probably not going to happen from this project. But there's a way forward, and we're really excited about investing in your future so that it's sustainable and it grows well beyond the $100 million effort that was envisioned by the task force. So these are our contact information, the website. You can go on there. You can join the mailing list, and we are available. We've left 10 minutes for questions. So Mike is here, and Julianne and I will do our best to answer any questions you have today, but you can certainly let us know throughout the year what questions you have as we look forward to rolling this out. Or did that answer everybody's question?
Hi there. I think what you're doing is really, really exciting, and taking the time to do that is excellent. That way you're going to be able to look at a whole bunch alternative types of equipment and whatnot that may be needed. Now, after the conference last night, I was thinking about some things that have gone on in my past, and basically what came up was biochar, okay? Now, biochar has 3 different components to it, 3 different products. It's got, of course, the biochar, which is the kind of like a black dirt, if you will, and it's very, very porous. It'll take all sorts of different types of fertilizers, retain them as well as water. But that's really not the main product going forward. The main product is the gas that is produced, which is captured, and also the liquid fuel, if you will, which is captured. That liquid fuel, I mean, you know, we're basically talking about something like petroleum fuel, something like that. But I mean, it's explosive. It'll do the job of heating. So where I'm going with this, if in fact there is an organization such as yourself that wanted to look further into the expense of biochar equipment, also you got to take a look at the feedstocks. I don't know. My first thought was, well, maybe dry kelp could produce something like this. But then I'm thinking, well, all right, well, how are you going to dry the kelp without? I mean, you can eventually, but so if you bring in all of this green waste, maybe from the landfill, I'm not sure, but I mean, I know that there's a tremendous amount of biofuels out there. You bring those things in, you basically start it with a starter fuel, but then it perpetuates itself with that gas as well as the oils that comes off of it. So then what you do is you capture that heat, maybe put it through a big blower, and then what you're doing with that heat is you are drying the kelp. And to me, that would be one heck of a project in terms of being able to take these steps that we discussed yesterday of drying the kelp so it can be shipped economically, and then who knows the next step after that, maybe pelletizing and all that kind of good stuff. But I just wanted to bring this up because it came in my mind last night, and thank you.
No, thank you for that. That's some good comments. One of the things I really like about the approach that we have, being inclusive, being transparent, and working across so many different partnerships, is that opportunities like that come up. Southeast Conference also manages a statewide biomass program. There'll be a fall conference. Biochar is on that list, and one of the heartbeats of all of our efforts in every economic sector is full utilization. So whatever that commodity is, whether it's fish or mariculture or timber or whatever, we want to fully utilize that. And so working with the different industry, it seems like everyone has a different take. The seaweed, kelp, what they use it for, what that waste stream will be. But certainly that is on the radar for consideration as we make sure that we utilize every bit of the mariculture waste stream if there is one. So, other thoughts or questions?
I've been trying to figure out the definition of underserved communities and keep getting a lot of real vague responses. I'm wondering if you could elaborate.
Well, and it's most of Alaska, but it's not all of Alaska. And we do have, different agencies have, and I think, do we have a link yet? Because we were given a link that kind of had a list of underserved communities. There's, that will morph to some degree with some of the Justice 40 analysis that is coming in. They're looking at whether or not they recognize subsistence lands in those calculations. But there is a federal definition for underserved communities, but it's pretty much everywhere except for the much more urban areas like Juneau, Anchorage, and those types. But there is a website that has that list that we're following. If you have a specific community in mind, we'd be happy to help you answer that one, though. Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm John Pinkley from Delta Junction, 42 years in Alaska, retired, electrician. I've been in the commercial fishing industry, got cold and wet. I've had my card punched and told that the fishery was over because there were too many juveniles. So you put 50 to 100,000 in, you get nothing back. I'm interested in the matching funds programs that you discussed earlier here in the grant money that's available, equipment and energy. And I'd also like everyone here to write down a particular link. It's called paddlepower.energy, okay? Just look it up and take appropriate action. I'll be in the UK to look at their device, and I intend to bring that here with the help of my good friend in Anchorage, Joe Henry. He was on the Board of Regents, okay?
All right.
He brought me out of retirement to come here on a fact-finding mission, okay? That's where I'm at, and thank you for listening.
All right, I trust your journey
Look
here
that
is
up.
going to find you a lot of facts. Julian, do you want to talk about the equipment RFP process, what we envision over the next couple of years?
Sure. On the equipment purchase, Southeast Conference will be purchasing equipment, but what we want to make sure that we're doing is that we're smart about what we're purchasing and that we're getting folks the right equipment that they need to reach their personal goals and what they're trying to do within the industry. So I think Robert touched on it a little bit. We're planning on getting someone to help us do sort of a pre-investment analysis that can kind of come in and consult with farmers, with others to talk about what are your goals, what are you trying to do, and also reach out to experts beyond Alaska that might have access to technology and equipment that we don't have here yet, and so that we're being really forward thinking too, that we're not buying equipment that's going to be outdated in a year, and that also matches the needs here in Alaska. Alaska is very different. Obviously, we've talked about that a lot. We will be putting out a notice, kind of like a request for proposals from folks and organizations and groups that are interested, and then we'll have a process in place where we can have that sort of consultation with you and to secure that equipment. We're still working with the EDA on some of the requirements. It's a federal agency. They have their own set of rules and requirements around assets and things like that. So we'll have to work with everyone to make sure it works for your organizations, but that's a little bit. And on the matching funds, I don't know if I fully understood your question, but the matching funds are dedicated to this grant. We were required to get up to 20% match. So in order to qualify for this grant, we had to bring along 20% match with us. So those are coming from the organizations that Robert mentioned. And as well as the state agency and the university, they are donating some of their staff time and materials for participating. So I don't know if that really, but feel free to find me later.
And we're still looking for more matching funds if anyone was wanting to contribute. But you know, the other thing about equipment is that as soon as we identify what is needed where, we also want to make sure that as much of that can be manufactured in the state as possible. So that's you know, this is an Alaska project made for Alaskans, and we're excited about the opportunity. So we wouldn't have this opportunity if you all weren't passionate about making this industry a real reality. So thank you for that and your contributions and your support and participation as we launch through 3-4 years together. So thanks.
Thank you. Robert and Juliana for the information and that presentation, and thanks to the Southeast Conference for leading these efforts. It's a huge lift, as you can imagine, after seeing those slides. Our next session is going to be on research and regulatory updates, and Dr. Alix Laferriere for the NOAA Alaska Fisheries Science Center Kodiak Lab is going to be facilitating this session, but she is also giving the first presentation. So please welcome Alix and Jordan Hollarsmith with Alaska Fisheries Science Center, the Juneau Lab.
Thanks, Missy. Good morning, everybody. I'm Alix from the Kodiak Lab, and I'm a research ecologist there. And Jordan and I are going to give a talk in a second, but before we get started, I wanted for you guys to identify, there's a notepad on your table or a little sticky note. I want you to identify that and get it into your hand. So you need a piece of paper. This is an amazing group of people, right? So we have growers, we have oyster growers, we have kelp growers, we have academics, we have research partners, we have regulators, we have all these number of stakeholders, and we're gonna do a crowdsourcing. We're gonna work from the bench throughout the day. So make sure you get yourself a piece of paper and be thinking about what is the most kind of pressing research question that you may have, and you'll work together at your table, and I am actually gonna collect these at the end of the day, or the end of the session, and kind of collate them. So it's your job to work this morning. Thank you very much. All right, and then I want to invite Jordan on from the Alaska Fisheries Science Center to start our talk.
All right. Thank you, Alix. Hi, everyone. Really great to see you all and meet a bunch of you in person who I've just talked to on the phone or something like that. So as Alix said, my name is Jordan Hollarsmith. I'm the Mariculture and Macroalgae lead research biologist for the Alaska Fisheries Science Center. Quite the mouthful. And our labs are here the lab I work in is here in Juneau out at Lena Point. If anyone is in town and wants to get a tour, let me know. I'd love to show you around. So we're doing a real brief talk today. We're just going to really quickly go over some project snapshots, including results from our herring deterrent studies, some oyster research going on at Alaska Fisheries Science Center, and habitat provisioning of kelp farms research. So this first one, herring deterrent study, this was motivated by a mass herring spawn event that occurred at one of our kelp farms here in the state, completely covered the crop, made it so that it couldn't be harvested, and it was a surprise as well. So this, we worked with that farm just to try and figure out what are some strategies we could test that might deter herring from a farm environment without causing any other adverse effects, and while also complying with laws and regulations surrounding marine mammals and things like that. And I just want to highlight the contributions of our undergraduate intern, Kyle Friedman. So for any undergrads or folks who know undergrads in the audience, great program to be part of. So this research took place at the NOAA Fisheries Little Port Walter Biological Field Station. It's on southern Baranof Island, and it's got all these in-water net pens we could use. So we caught a bunch of herring, put them into these net pens, and we tested 4 different main strategies. One was creating a wall of bubbles. The other was strobing lights. The other was suspended objects moving in the water column, kind of as if they were tied to buoys or something like that, because herring are kind of skittish. And the final one was sound. And our goal was to take test objects that were either readily available off the shelf or people might already have on them, except for bubbles. That one's a trickier one. And we used sonar to be able to look at herring response. So this is kind of what the sonar looks like. You can see all the little dots moving around. Those are all the little herring. And then in a second, you'd be able to see the bubbles come on and the herring disperse. And that allowed us to see fish movement in pretty turbid waters. So those are the bubbles going on, and all the herring run away. So our results, so this is a graph where you can see the different kind of categories we tested, and we tested kind of different numbers of suspended objects in the water. And then what you'll find is there's going to be kind of masses on the graph, and where the mass is where most of the fish were. And so if the fish are close to 0, that means they were really close to the deterrent and it didn't work.
And if the mass is up here, that means they were kind of deterred away. So for bubbles, oh, and I'm sorry, we've got on and off. So bubbles, you see when it's on, the fish are kind of well distributed everywhere, and when it's off, they're up here. So they have been deterred away. That one was a success. For the pingers and the lights, they look exactly the same if it was on or off. They didn't care. And for the flashers in the water, you can see this mass moves closer, so it seems like they served as an attractant. Not what we wanted. So our conclusion was that of these things that we tested, bubbles worked. But for those of you who work on farms, you know that it's no small task to install a bubble curtain or any kind of bubble device on your farm. You need an air compressor, you need tubing or something in the water, you need something to power that air compressor, some kind of generator, which requires a floating platform. It goes on and on. So that was really unfortunate that that was the one that worked. That's kind of where our study's at. If folks are interested in pursuing this further or have other ideas of things to test or ways to go about it, please come talk to me. This is really an industry-driven question, so I want to be able to serve what you guys need. And now, quick change to oysters. So we can now hold oysters in the lab, and we have some Exxon Valdez oil spill money with the goal of developing a research oyster hatchery here in Juneau. So the original objectives were to develop Alaska-specific oyster brood stock, or looking at conditioning methods that will optimize growth in the Evo spill area, and also to develop methods for spawning and rearing Pacific oyster larvae that are tailored to conditions in Alaska and cost-effective at scale. So this is also going to be a really collaborative effort. This is our space. We're still building it out. We've just hired Henry Fleener here to help us lead these hatchery efforts. And Becca Cates is also going to be a technician on this. So again, please come talk to me about this. It's at its beginning stages, and we're really excited to approach this collaboratively, bring a bunch of folks from Alaska, outside of Alaska, in to work on this with us. And now I will hand it off to Alix.
Thanks, Jordan. So as I said before, I'm based in the Kodiak lab, and classically we are a crab lab, but we are really well set up for looking at climatic changes like ocean acidification and things. And so, as Jordan said, the Board of Fish made an amendment to the regulation so we can now hold oysters in NOAA facilities. And we are doing an kind of an oyster startup research program in Kodiak, and we want to focus on subadults. We want to look at things like growth and survival, ocean acidification. We really have the capability to kind of turn the clock or the timeline on changing ocean conditions. And then I'm also curious about co-culture. Some people were talking about co-culture yesterday and the benefits of growing kelp with your oysters and how that can de-acidify the water and things like that. And what we're really interested in is what are the research questions that the industry would benefit from. So what are the questions that you have on your farm once they're kind of a subadult or adult, and then what's going to get them to product and to market. So I would love to start a dialogue on that, and I've talked to a number of growers, and so I think there's really cool capability. It's neat too with Kodiak is that the lab is, it's right there in town, and we have all these capabilities, and then right outside the door we can have farming operations, and then also we're adjacent to Sea Grant, so there's a lot of opportunity there. Missy Good mentioned the Mariculture Research and Training Center yesterday, and that the website has been launched, and that's an area where you can submit a research question, and so we're talking about that all the time, which is really nice. And then switching gears entirely, I just said that we have farms right outside the door. I literally can see kelp farms from my office window at the Kodiak lab, which is really nice. And we're just started a pilot project looking at habitat assessment of kelp farms. So there's a lot that's talked about kelp farms and the ecosystem services and the benefits to the environment. And I'm specifically interested in looking at what kind of habitat provisioning do these farms provide for our environment. So I'm collaborating with Alf Pryor and Lexa Meyer on Alaska ocean farms. And the question is really simple. Answering it is quite hard, but the question is simple. It's like, do we have fish aggregating around the farms? Do those compositions change throughout the season and throughout the grow-up period? And then once we harvest the kelp, how does that change? So we have all this structure in the water from the farm, and when then the kelp grows to about 2 meters and we take it out, do all those fish, if there are fish, do they disappear, right? So there's a lot of information, like the farmers tell us they see fish. Could we see juvenile salmonids around the farm? Are they using this habitat? And then how does it compare to the natural kelp bed? So again, throughout the growing season and throughout the time series as well. We're going to take a 3-method approach, and we just started. We started collecting data last week, which is exciting. We're doing visual surveys with GoPro cameras, so super simple. And we have colleagues in the coast of Maine and also in New Zealand that are doing a parallel study, which has been really fun to kind of cross-compare. And they're really keen to know what we're seeing in Alaska and how does it compare to New Zealand and how does it compare to Maine, and are those ecosystem services similar? So GoPro camera, it's a 2-hour deployment period. We just drop the buoy system. It's looking at the lines, and then we'll adjust the camera based on the line throughout the season as the kelp gets longer. And then we want to cross-validate that with eDNA sampling. So it's just water sampling, and then we do a PCR analysis in the lab to try to see what species are in the water column. And then we're going to do a fish collection at peak productivity, so maybe like April or May, right before harvest and right after harvest. And we're going to do that fish collection with juvenile fish collection with SMRFs, which is a funny acronym for Standard Monitoring Units for the Recruitment of Fishes. It's basically big snow fencing with little net inside, and so the fish really like to kind of aggregate around it, and it's just a standard unit that you can cross-compare. So we're really keen to look at this in Kodiak, and we would love to expand the project out across Alaska and again compare that across the globe. So with that, I think we can take questions. I think we have time. And Jordan also has a number of posters. Jordan's poster, Juliana's poster, and Rebecca's poster. And I think they're all on this wall. Thanks, you guys. If you guys have any questions, I'll just remind us too, if we can use the microphone and or if the speaker can reiterate the question. Any questions? I think Alicia's coming up. Go for it, Marcus.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Really interesting, and thank you for the work on the herring spawn on kelp. That was not my favorite day. One question I have is there any plans to do assessment of what what we're seeing is a lot more multi-species culturing, where you shellfish and seaweed on the same location. Is there are there any plans to assess what the benefits or effects of that type of activity are? Is there a mutual benefit, and what can that be quantified? Just curious, because it seems like there ought to be some, there's going to be some more than a null benefit or null impact.
Yeah, so I mentioned this Exxon Valdez oil spill grant. It's part of a much larger project, and in that includes looking at polyculture or the co-culture benefits, using things like isotopes, fatty acids, understanding how energetics might be moving between the different species, how it might be changing the water chemistry. And so that's all focused in Prince William Sound, Ketchikan Bay, and Kodiak, but there could be opportunities for us to kind of use that as match or leverage and expand to other parts of Alaska as well.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Marcos.
Hello, I'm Linda Shaw with NIMS Habitat, and super excited about all your work. Alix, my question is for you. So you mentioned for your eDNA methodology that you were going to do PCR, and I was curious because PCR is more species specific than metabar coding, which metabar coding would be looking at more community structure of fishes. So I was curious, if you had thought about metabar coding, and then also for the PCR, what species you were targeting.
Great question. So again, it's just a pilot project, and so we're considering both, and we're actually actively seeking funding at the moment. But I think there's some interest from the farmers and from myself as well to see if juvenile salmonids are using the farms for this pilot study, and then I think we can use that data to kind of funnel into other studies. But yeah, thank you.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Great. All right, that's all we have time for questions. Thank you very much. And can I invite Bobbi Hudson from the Pacific Shellfish Institute? She's going to be talking to us about ecosystem services from Mariculture, Valuation, and Relevance in Alaska. And then it's just this one, and if it's not working, just point it back.
Okay, that's the forward. Okay, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you to Missy and Jenny for inviting me back this year. So, yeah, I'm Bobbi Hudson. I'm the director of the Pacific Shellfish Institute. We are a nonprofit research institution that works very closely with shellfish producers all across the country, but primarily on the West Coast. So, yeah, that is what I will be talking about today. I have a lot to cover, but I'm going to try to keep it simple. So I'm glad we already talked a little bit about ecosystem services, but I'm going to pull us through that, give you some examples in mariculture, and then some specific valuation methods, how that might work, how it works with water quality trading, and then end about carbon trading and sort of the counterintuitive nature of shell formation and how that relates to CO2. So ecosystem services are the direct and indirect, sorry, it's a little awkward to have to look sideways when I want to be looking at all of you. The direct and indirect contributions ecosystems provide for human well-being and quality of life. So the key there really is the human influence, the benefits that humans receive. And so you might hear terms like natural capital. So ecosystems are the natural capital. So back in the mid-2000s, this report was commissioned as part of I think it was a National Sea Grant project that my organization had, and Trina Wellman and colleagues at Northern Economics put it together for us. But summarizing the state of the science and the literature of how do we value ecosystem services from shellfish and all these activities surrounding shellfish. So of the four categories of ecosystem services specific to shellfish, are for provisioning services are commercial, recreational, and subsistence fisheries and aquaculture. So those are like the biggest ones that we talk about when we talk about valuing the services, because those are the biggest things we receive, right? The food from those things. But there's also fertilizer and building materials like lime from shell, jewelry, regulating services, water quality maintenance, which I'll be talking about a little bit today, protection of our coastlines through a variety of processes, and supporting services of cycling of nutrients and nursery habitats, as colleagues at NOAA were just talking about, and then cultural services, which are tourism and recreation and the value that we place on those things, and then the symbolic nature of some of these organisms to our coastal heritage. So this is a great report if you're interested in this topic. So this is back in 2020, but a global review of ecosystem services provided by bivalves specifically, which is of course what I'm most interested in, but they also provide a lot of economic estimates of the value of bivalves. I guess I go back, and it's probably really hard to see those references, so I will mention I'm happy to share all these with everybody. So one ecosystem service that I've looked at quite a bit, and Pacific Shellfish Institute has done projects on, is this nutrient bioextraction. So I created this graphic that hopefully is pretty simple, but the basic thing is that shellfish, through their filter feeding activities, are taking up phytoplankton and other organic matter, and they're going to excrete some of that, but the majority of it can be estimated as removed from removing those animals through harvest. So the nutrient bioextraction is growing or harvesting shellfish or seaweed to remove nutrients specifically. So where has this been applied? Many of you are probably familiar with this project in Sweden. That's something that gets talked about a lot with reference to ecosystem services and nutrient benefits of shellfish. And so this was agro-aqua recycling of nutrients using mussels and Odd Lindell's work. And through that, and it's consistent across the literature and other projects, is that a single mussel is about 1% nitrogen and just under 0.1% phosphorus. Another project in the Baltic, I like this one because it has a great infographic, but growing mussels for nutrient uptake, but then you get all these other benefits too. You still have the food, you have feed, you have fertilizer, and it could be an energy source. So my organization took that, those other examples, and we tried a project in South Puget Sound. Bud Inlet is the southernmost finger of South Puget Sound. It's over-enriched from terrestrial inputs, anthropogenic inputs. So there is a very robust Middleus trossulus, the blue mussel, in the water column there. And so we just provided those mussels a substrate to settle on. So it was basically seat belt material that we hung under docks. And lo and behold, yeah, the mussels settled on it. So then we monitored those. Some areas had crab and other things that were eating them, but lots of other organisms settled on those straps as well. But basically by the end of the summer, we did this a few seasons, but we had a huge biomass of mussels. So we harvested that, and it's actually pretty gross, but we chipped them. We ran them through a chipper that we rented and didn't tell the facility what we were doing with it, but we created this mussel slurry and made compost with partnerships with Evergreen State College, Washington Department of Corrections, and Washington State University. And that was our final product in the back of my truck, some really beautiful compost that we then did demonstration farms to, as a sort of outreach educational opportunity in the community about nutrient over-enrichment and how mussels can help with that problem. We also did, my education outreach staff did growth trials in classrooms comparing different types of compost against this, what we ended up calling surf to turf mussel compost. And we also gave it away at community events, and people loved it and kind of missed the boat. I should have done a willingness to pay valuation for what people might have been willing to purchase that mussel compost for, but we just gave it away. So then one step further from that. So we know we can grow those mussels. We know that each of those, or that all the biomass has 1% nitrogen and 0.08% phosphorus. We did measure it as well, but it was consistent with previous studies. And so from that, we know that of all that mussel biomass that we removed that season, we know we removed 80 pounds of nitrogen and 6.4 pounds of phosphorus. So if we wanted to scale up, we had these straps in different marinas in Bud Inlet, and that yellow highlighted area is where we had the straps, which represented 120 straps in our little pilot project. And we would never do this because it would sink the marina, but if we put the straps throughout the marina, there was room for almost 1,700 straps. And so just thinking about scale on this, with that 1% nitrogen, we would end up removing 6,000 pounds of nitrogen in one season. And so that's equivalent to about 600 people. So the average output of each of us over a year is about 10 pounds of nitrogen. So then one step further, how do we value that? So different economic valuation methods. So economic concept of value is broadly defined as any net change in human well-being or welfare. So very good parallel with what we're talking about with ecosystem services. Again, that same paper that I referenced, or great literature report that Northern Economics put together, they summarized all these for us. But these are the two sort of categories of economic valuation, revealed preference or market. And so within that, there's these different ways you can do the valuation to achieve a monetary value. So market price, obviously that's the goods bought and sold. So that's like, our aquaculture. Productivity, things that are contributing to other commercial goods. Hedonic pricing is commonly used for like housing. So if you have differences in value of your home based on an environmental attribute, positive or negative. So there's also travel costs, so you can estimate the value of that. Damage cost avoided, replacement cost, and substitute cost, which is some examples I have for you today. And then there's also these more hypothetical sort of survey-based approaches, stated preference and non-market. So that's The willingness to pay, I mentioned. So contingent valuation, you ask people what they're willing to pay for something. Contingent choice, you've got groups of different environmental assets and they choose their preference, or then benefits transfer, so you can do a valuation in one region or for one issue and then transfer that to another region or a different issue. So an example of this, water quality trading. I'm sure everyone has heard of this. It's not broadly in application in the States, but a voluntary market-based approach that might achieve water quality standards more efficiently and at a lower cost than traditional methods. So we're looking at that cost piece. So back to that mussel example, here's how you get to that cost. So there's a cost associated with removing nitrogen from our wastewater, right? So this particular wastewater treatment facility, that's at WWTP, in the city of Shelton, had to upgrade their nitrogen removal technology down to a 10 milligram per liter in their effluent, right? And so we knew that the local shellfish producers, so the aquaculture in that region, were already producing enough shellfish broadly, that ends up being almost 26,000 pounds of nitrogen removed. So the cost of that upgrade for the city of Shelton was a $3 per pound for each pound of nitrogen. So it's just pretty basic. Hopefully I've not confused matters, but so the value of those shellfish, that ecosystem service that those shellfish are already providing in the nitrogen removal is $77,000. And another example, because this is where water quality trading really comes in, is there, as you get lower removal needed, in this case, this is Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, Thurston County. They needed to get to a lower higher nitrogen removal technology, but to a lower level in their effluent. So they had to make an upgrade to 2.25 milligrams per liter in their effluent. Well, that costs a lot more. It's $25 per pound of that life cycle cost for that nitrogen removal technology. And so that represents a $650,000 benefit that the shellfish in the region are providing. So these are just examples. I just wanted to walk you through how that works, how you do evaluation. You can also do this with models. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of this, but there are a few models that do this, but this one I have a bit of experience with. The farm model, João Ferreira and Suzanne Bricker added a nutrient removal component to the farm model so that you could estimate what those water quality benefits are. So they built it right into their model, and it's associated with local environmental condition and then the amount of shellfish produced. And that's kind of what it looks like. But yeah, plug and play. And lo and behold, yes, we can make estimates. So we published this work quite a while ago now, but for Chugach clams. That was the first time somebody had done it for Chugach, but you can make these estimates for different bivalves. So all those examples I give, but does nutrient trading really make sense here in Alaska? I would say not so much, because the areas that I was talking about have an over-enrichment issue, right? We don't have those same kinds of issues on our coasts here in Alaska. So we don't have this nutrient over-enrichment problem. But we can still estimate what the extractive benefit of mariculture might be for both shellfish and seaweed. So a little shout out to Sherry and the kits that she has that are sort of starting to answer this question a bit. And then what about carbon trading? Something that I get asked about a lot, actually. I meant to say that at the beginning of this presentation. I chose this topic because I get asked these questions by particularly farmers. But yeah, this idea has been out here for a while. This is a fantastic report if you want to dive into the ins and outs of carbon dioxide removal in the ocean. World Resources Institute has done some really great work in the realm of ecosystem services and valuations. Carbon cycle, I think most of us are fairly familiar with this, but I just wanted to get to this. Like, obviously, we got a lot of carbon in the ocean, so what we're all interested in. Actually, I'm gonna, where it goes, I don't want to bore us with that, but seaweeds, we've talked a lot about seaweeds this last couple days. We'll talk more about it this afternoon, but again, that same infographic we had for the shellfish in the Baltic Seas example, what can we do with algae besides removing emissions? It's sort of like these co-benefits. There's still animal feed, there's still a protein, it's still a biofuel, a soil amendment, the whole sinking thing, that's sort of verdict's out on that, but some really great resources to learn more about this. And then this just came out, carbon sequestration by shellfish farming, a potential negative emissions technology. So the title tells you what they're after there. But this was estimate in China, and so they actually add a value to those services of carbon potential negative emissions technology. But the verdict's still out. There's actually a bit of a debate. I used to show this graphic a lot, and it seems pretty straightforward. We've got a lot of carbon in the ocean. You're making shell, it's in the shell, right? You're locking carbon in the shell. But actually, the chemical equation, you're releasing carbon dioxide when you form shell. So here's our, equation at equilibrium, but to produce that calcium carbonate, you've got CO2 and water produced. So it's actually releasing CO2. Now, the degree to which that CO2 is then going to the atmosphere, that's up for debate. A lot of people looking at it, interested in trying to get a better handle on that, but I think the bottom line is CO2 is definitely produced. So if we're talking about carbon sequestration specifically, which is storage of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, then it's hard to make a case for shellfish in this, despite estimates that have been out. Oh, I feel like there we go. So I would advocate that if we're taking shellfish from the ocean, we're moving carbon out of the ocean, but if we put it back in, put that shell back, it has the capacity to continue to buffer the ocean chemistry and allow the ocean to continue to absorb that CO2, right? That's where most of that atmospheric CO2 is coming into our oceans. So put it back, continue to let it be absorbed. Or another mechanism we could think about that would actually be carbon sequestration is using shell. So using shell, recycling it into something else, building materials, some other product, and eliminating the use or extraction of virgin materials. So my point with all this is that unless we do those things with shellfish, I think it's difficult to make the case that shellfish are in fact providing carbon sequestration. So actually I'm gonna skip over that, but that's it. That's all I have. Thank you. Out of time.
Thank you so much, Bobbi. We're going to keep moving because we're into the lightning round now. So Patryce, if you can join us up here from the DEC Environmental Health Lab, she's going to start us off. And no slides, right? No. Okay, great.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, good morning. It is the lightning round, so I will try to talk slow enough but still get everything out. My name is Patryce. I'm the chief of the Environmental Health Lab for the state of Alaska in Anchorage. I've been participating with your guys' shellfish testing for over a dozen years now. But we're on the edge of a lot of changes. Not only are you guys changing your industry, but we have 3 big projects we're working on to change potential testing. The first one we have that is underway right now is a method development to change the way we can do wet storage testing. Right now, we have only one farm that's participating. The Bates are the only ones using this permit option, but they are also helping us by providing some duplicate samples to test this theory. And what that will do is, right now, since they're the only users, it will take a test that takes 4 days and can reduce it down into 1. So we are doing a lot of side-by-side testing right now and evaluating the efficacy, and we hope to put forward a proposal to the ISSC to get that approved. The next one is because of the Southeast Conference funding and that Project 7 that we're part of, we're getting some equipment. The first one is some receptor binding assay, the scintillation device. We want to validate that method to be used for Alaskan commercial shellfish. right now it's not validated for use for oysters or gooey ducks, I think, or scallops. Blue mussels, I think, are the only commercial species we can use it for. The goal there is to try to find a way to get off of the mouse bioassay that's cost effective and still speedy. The last several years between the pandemic and the climate change, it has been crazy trying to keep a mouse supply going. So we're trying to find ways to ensure our success without that dependency. That said, I know Alutiiq Pride, you know, they're partnering and they're trying to bring it on as well, and they're all finding the same problems with some of the isotopes. So we're going to see how that shakes out, but we're looking forward to at least giving that a shot. The other one is back to that bleeding edge that Juliana talked about, is a very big fancy piece of equipment called a triple quad, and that methodology would allow us to provide those congener profiles of paralytic shellfish toxins and help us to be able to better define the differences in our areas. When we do totality tests, you know, we're just getting a total PST number, whether it's saxitoxin based or full mouse death based. It only paints part of the picture, and getting some of that background we hope will help define opportunities to use maybe field tests or develop field tests or figure out where there's going to be good use for that data. So that one is not in use at all in the country. So this is really right out there on the front end. It's been developed in the UK because they haven't been doing mouse testing for years. So, but we're looking forward to bringing that equipment on, and that's huge. In my dozen years at the state, I have gotten capital money one time to do equipment. And so these partnerships are really key, because without it, we would be still in the Stone Ages for some things. So those are our big three projects we're working on. With the Southeast Conference, though, we are also getting 2 positions. So that is also going to benefit not only these validation projects, but of course your commercial submissions as well. And these goals are to make it that we can grow with you. Can we get you these results out as fast as you need? So we'll be talking about this for every shellfish meeting for the next 5 years at least, and all the milestones that we have to go with. But that's the highlights of what we got going at the lab.
All right, with the lightning round, it's hard to take questions, but with like with Bobbi, if you grab up people at the break. Thank you, Patryce. Great, and now we have Maile Branson from the Alutiiq Pride Marine Institute.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'll give them a second to get the slide up here. Okay, my name is Maile Branson, and I am the Science Director at Chugach Regional Resources Commission and the Alutiiq Pride Marine Institute. Most of you probably know us as the former Alutiiq Pride Shellfish Hatchery. In 2020, we underwent a major rebranding and decided to expand from just commercial shellfish production to research, mariculture, R&D, and monitoring, which is what I'm going to talk to you guys about today. We've just established this monitoring program. We call it the Chugach Regional Ocean Monitoring Program, or CROM for short. And what it is it's a comprehensive phytoplankton, biotoxin, and water chemistry monitoring program across our region in South Central Alaska. So a little bit of background about the Chugach Regional Resources Commission. We are a consortium of 7 tribes in the South Central Alaska region, and that includes Port Graham, Nanwalek, Katuchik, which is Seward, Chiniga, Tutitlik, Valdez Native Tribe, and Eyak in Cordova. We were established in the early 90s with the goal of natural resource advocacy. So essentially what our folks were finding is after the oil spill, a lot of the tribes felt like they weren't being heard, especially in these sort of policy spaces. And so that was kind of the initial goal of the organization. And we acquired the Alutiiq Pride Marine Institute in 1992 and have been operating it ever since. And so also a little bit of background about our organization. We operate at the discretion of our board. We have 7 board members who represent, they are tribal leaders from each of our constituent tribes. And essentially, they provide our research directives. So we have quarterly board meetings, and at every quarterly board meeting, they kind of express to us what they're seeing in the environment, what's changing, and what they're concerned about addressing. And so, as you can see here, this is a little snippet from one of our board meeting discussions. And I'd like to just note that clams, paralytic shellfish poisoning, subsistence, and shellfish resources was a pretty hot topic and something that our tribes were really concerned about. So with that, our monitoring program was born. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the structure of this program. Essentially, this program relies heavily on community samplers. So we have one in each of our 7 communities, and they are usually tribal members. And these tribal citizen scientists will take samples for us on a weekly basis throughout the year. They will collect dissolved inorganic carbon samples, seawater chemistry. They'll take a shellfish sample during the summer months. They'll, of course, collect environmental and metadata, and they conduct phytoplankton tows. And so what they do is they package all of those up and they send them back to us. And at Alutiiq Pride, we do microscopic species identification of the phytoplankton. We evaluate seawater carbonate chemistry, and we do biotoxin analyses on the shellfish. So we have both capabilities, actually ELISA and receptor binding assay, although as a few folks have expressed, there have been some supply chain issues with the tritiated saxitoxins, so it's been challenging to develop that RBA method. And so those are, in the gray, you have the analyses that we're performing right now, and in the blue we have everything that we've planned for 2023 and 2024. So we're going to bring on board qPCR for molecular species ID for phytoplankton, and we're going to target both Alexandrium and Pseudonychia. And we're also going to bring on board nutrient analyses in-house, so that's really exciting. And of course, we didn't have time to share our initial data with you, so our objectives are, of course, safe shellfish harvest for all. That, of course, includes subsistence, recreational, and mariculture users. Of course, baseline profiles of ocean chemistry and harmful algal bloom conditions in Prince William Sound and Lower Cook Inlet. And then our hope is that perhaps we can use these data for modeling efforts in the future. And that's it. Just a big shout out to our funders, specifically the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council, and all of our collaborators as well. And feel free to check out, we have all of the raw data. They're made available in real time on our website. So feel free to check those out and utilize them as you please.
Awesome. Great. Can we have Annette come up also from the Alutiiq Pride Marine Institute, please? Are you right there? Very good.
Thank you. It's just the pointer does not work. Point it back there. Got it. Perfect.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name's Annette Jarosz. I'm a biologist at Alutiiq Pride Marine Institute, and I'm also a grad student at UAF. Actually, the last 2 talks set me up perfectly as an intro. I work at Alutiiq Pride in the Chrome program doing harmful algal bloom and saxitoxin and paralytic shellfish research. So today I'm going to be talking about my graduate study research. I'm just starting the project, so I only have a little bit of data, but it seemed pertinent for this type of mariculture conference. And so for the past 2 summers, 2021 and 2022, I've gone out to the local beach in Seward and collected 3 species of bivalves. I collected blue mussels, shawshell clams, and cockles. And after the 2 years of collecting them, I sent about 85 samples to DEC so that they could run the high-performance liquid chromatography system. And yeah, so I sent those all to DEC, and what the HPLC does is it breaks down the toxins into congeners, and they can detect 12 different congeners of the paralytic shellfish toxins, which is a whole suite of over 50 toxins. And this is the preliminary data. What I have so far, if what I've gotten back, is just 2022 data from July to October. And it's what we expected to see. Blue mussels are the highest of the 3 species, pretty variable. They intake the toxin really quickly. They get rid of the toxin quickly. And the soft shell clams and cockles were below limit of detection, except for one point at the end of August. Okay, the most interesting part, but I don't have too much time to get into it, is the congener profiles. So the most important thing that I want to note is that saxitoxin, colors are a little hard to see, but saxitoxin was not detected in any measurable amount. And then, you know, you can see the blue mussels, they have higher concentrations of their congeners, makes sense, they had more toxins, total toxicity. Okay, oops. So why is this important? Why did I spend 2 summers digging in the mud, collecting all these species? Well, it's important because at Alutiiq Pride, we want to create methodologies and systems in place so that we can have our community members, our tribal members, send us shellfish that they collect subsistently, and they can make sure that it's safe to eat. And we want to make sure we can do this cost effectively, in a timely manner, and accurately. So right now we have DEC, which is great, but they're very busy. They have a lot of samples they need to test. So it takes a while to get the samples back, and it's not what we can really utilize for our communities. So we're trying to find new assays. As Maile touched on, we have developed and are using the immunoassay, which is the ELISA enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay, which is great. It's super easy, comes in a kit. Unfortunately, it uses antibody-based recognition, and the antibody you use is specifically linked to saxitoxin, which in our previous one, we're not finding. So we're finding there are measurable limits of toxicity, but there's no saxitoxin. So ELISAs are just not the best. So that brings us to receptor binding assays. So we know that we really need to work on getting this up and running. We're finding that this will be the best assay for us to use. Little hiccups in that it's radioactive, and there's a couple regulations that we need to figure out, and supply chain issues. But this information is really important to know which method is most effective and to help our communities. And that's about it. Yeah, I don't know if we're not doing questions.
I think you have 1 minute. You have time.
Oh, okay. Wow, went through it fast. Okay.
All right, we'll keep rolling. All right, Michelle Morris from Fish and Game. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Michelle Morris. I'm the statewide permit coordinator for Alaska Department of Fish and Game. I help facilitate processing of all aquatic farm-related permits, as well as all aquatic resource permits for research and marine waters. Today, I'm going to be going over pretty quickly here all the changes that happened in 2022 and give you some numbers of where we're at and where we are going. As you've heard already, the Invertebrate Enhancement Bill, House Bill 41, passed legislation last session and then was signed into law on October 5th, 2022. This new law enables private nonprofit organizations to engage in shellfish enhancement projects for common property purposes. Right now, regulations are currently in development to define the permitting process and what the parameters will be regarding common property fisheries, possible cost recovery, and other associated things. And so the potential projects that could come out of this include crabs, sea cucumbers, pinto abalone, chitons, and other indigenous bivalves. And of course, you already heard this too, but yeah, we adapted some new change of regulation for Fish and Game to pertaining to the importation of species, since Pacific oysters are not indigenous to Alaska. They fall under the regulatory thing where they could only be imported for aquaculture purposes. So we have added the word research in there, and this has opened up the door to allowing any organization to study or to use oysters for research purposes. And of course, as you know, it's extremely beneficial to the industry by enabling these organizations who are not aquatic farms to use oysters. Fish and Game launched the new online portal called My Farm in the fall of 2022. This allows all Fish and Game operation permit holders the ability to see the details of their operation permit. You can view, apply for stock transport permits, aquatic stock acquisition permits, using several different features. Annual reports were just submitted through this new service last month for the first time. So that was super great. Allows operators to see all their previous permit information, annual reports, and you can use a bunch of drop-down lists, and has those sideboards, so you can't do something wrong, hopefully. Less QC process for me, no data entry. It's pretty slick. Right now, I'm still missing about a quarter of the 2022 annual reports that were due back on January 30th, so if you are a farmer and you owe me a report, come see me, and I can help you navigate the process. And also because of this, we don't have a lot of the preliminary data information from 2022 yet. It's still in the works, but hopefully we'll have that start being available online here in the next couple of months. So this slide kind of shows where we are at. I got the breakdown of aquatic farms and hatchery operation permits at the end of 2022 with the 2021 numbers in the parentheses. So you can see at the end of 2022, there were 82 permitted aquatic farms and 6 hatcheries for a total of 1,230 acres. 32 of these were shellfish only, meaning just oyster or just clam. 24 permits were for aquatic plants only, and the other 26 farms are permitted for a combination of either multiple shellfish species or a combination of shellfish and aquatic plants together. Here you can see aquatic plant farms take up about a quarter of the issued permits, but they are half the acreage that are permitted out there. Another interesting note that I noticed here is that the total number of farms is pretty much the same at the end of the year, but there's a shift from single shellfish species operations, which used to be about half the total of permits, decreasing to about 36% because the number of combinations are going up, which means that farms are diversifying. So as all the hype related into a boom, this is the 10-year history of applications by type. First aquatic farm permit was for kelp, was applied for and issued in 2016, which is 7 years ago. Previously, there had been a lull in aquatic farm applications since the last surge in 2005, with only 54 applications for a 10-year period from 2006 to 2016. But since 2017, the number of applications has rapidly increased to a brand new high of 23 applications in last year alone, and 16 of those were for the culture of aquatic plants only. So this is the same graph showing the same 10 years, but to basically sum up, 105 applications have come in the past 10 years, with 94 of those being since 2017. Of all these applications received, 40 are now permitted and active, 5 were permitted but have now since closed, 20 are withdrawn, and 40 are still pending. And of those 40 that are left that are still pending, 16 of these are with the state in some sort of phase of review, and 24 are waiting for applicants to either get back to us or waiting for their proof of insurance and bonding. And so far, Fish and Game's only got 1 application for this year. So, but it closes April 30th, and that's when the majority of them will probably come in. And then, I also wanted to note too that since we're also talking research, in 2022, there was 24 aquatic resource permits for research directly related to mariculture in the last year. Thanks for the quick update. There's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me. And if you email me, I am Michelle Morris 2, because if you email 1, you get a dental hygienist in Anchorage.
Thanks, Michelle. That's really good to know. I think I have done talked to the dental hygienist in Anchorage. And that's exciting. 24 research permits all related to mariculture. Really cool. Welcome up Paul, please. He's going to talk to us about geoducks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, as we've listened to these conferences, I mean, geoducks seem to have kind of faded into the background, I just want to assure you we're still alive and well. And we got about 12 farms down in Southeast. We've just applied for 5 more out in the Aleutians. So it takes about 7 years for a gooey duck to mature to market size. So how do we know that? We went and harvested a site, about a dozen animals, and so some of them were actually wild, older stock. So one was 58 years old, one was 83 years old. Then there was a whole group that right around 7 or 8 years old, and we knew that those were the ones that we had planted. So, up to maybe 1.5 pounds, maybe up to 1 kilogram in size, which is good market size. So anyway, our main problem has really been the availability of seed. So we're working on actually putting in a hatchery into Southeast Alaska. It's a little bit complicated. You got to, through the geneticist, take your broodstock samples, send them to the hatchery. We take about 100 animals, something like that. We'll spawn about 30 million seed, of which maybe 500,000 would survive after you feed them plankton and things like that. So in any case, the issues we're raising here, why not as sexy or cool as some of the research that's going on. We're glad to see that happening. We're down to the baseline of the site control of the farmer, which means your lease for your farm and your right to utilize it. And so we ran up against some issues within the law, the statute, and we're 20 years in operation. So you get a 10-year lease, you're gonna do kind of a review, and then it rolls that over, and then you're gonna get to where you're at 20 years. Well, now they're saying we gotta do a complete best interest finding. It looks like the law says at that point your lease is actually canceled, which means you're applying for a brand new lease, everything that you had to go through for your initial lease. I think it probably means that somebody could at that point actually file for your lease, overfile on your lease, in which case their laws say if more than one person applies for the lease, you got to do a competitive bid, which means you'd be bidding against yourself or somebody else to come in and say, well, I'm bidding against taking all the product that you got on your site. So anyway, some of these are unintended consequences or maybe things that were overlooked because DNR does a lot of leasing for a lot of different things, oil and gas, agriculture, and things like that. So if you could, let's see, how do I press the right button to get a new one? Okay, so here are some of the issues that we had against only one renewal, best interest finding, which is really extensive, expensive. We're being charged another $1,500 to do it, and then possible overfiling. This creates an unstable environment. When we go to some investors and say we want you to invest, they say, well, how secure are your leases? Well, at this renewal point, someone could come in and overfile on us and actually take our lease away. And the other thing is that they have in their regulations, you have to have $15,000 annual sales from every site. And if you don't do that, it says they can cancel your lease. So that definitely needs to be fixed. There's many reasons why at times you wouldn't have $15,000 worth of sales. You could have a PSP outbreak. We've had them last for more than a year. We could have problems with the trade wars with China. It could just be we want them to grow another year. The market conditions aren't right. So we're suggesting that it be more based on the work plans that you have, similar to what Fish and Game does when they give us an operational permit. You're planting seed, you're doing predator netting. So part of this, one renewal, essentially what you get is a 10-year plus 10, so that's 20 years. If we're saying that's your initial lease and you can renew it, then basically you could get another lease, which would be another 20 years. At that point, you'd have to do a best interest finding and all of that. That's a reasonable amount of time to run your farm and for your investment. They'd have public notice and comment at 20 years, but no best interest finding, because that's at the point that you open yourself up for nuisance lawsuits for people who just don't like mariculture or whatever, but it still allows the public to weigh in if they have any issues. Site work requirements, no site overfiling allowed, And then at the 20 years, if the site's in non-compliance, then the department should take it back and say, your lease is canceled, and now somebody else can file for it. And the last one is that the department should better enforce non-compliance, because apparently in some areas, people have filed for sites, haven't farmed on them, and are just sitting on them for speculation so somebody's going to have to buy me out because I have the site. So those are the essentials, and we were very happy. DNR was here yesterday, Director of Mining, Gas, and Minerals, and the department's going to work with us on this. Sarah Vance, head of the Fisheries Committee, is going to take this up. So there's going to be some twists and turns. The Shellfish Growers Association knows about this, the Mariculture Alliance. So we all need to weigh in to make sure that we do something to fix this so that we can have more stability in the industry. And I'll leave it at that if anybody has any questions. But you should be getting updates as this goes through the legislature. As you know, there's a lot of twists and turns as things go on there. Over.
Thanks, Paul. And come on up, Julie. Julie's going to talk to us about our benefits from national and international interests.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Julie Decker. I work for the Alaska Fisheries Development Foundation, and while the slides are coming up, the AFDF is a nonprofit that broadly represents the Alaska seafood industry in the areas of research and development, harvesters, processors, and support sector businesses. So I've been working in this area of, trying to help support mariculture development now for about 8 or 9 years. And something I think that's an interesting thing to point out that we may or may not been sort of focusing on is the interest in Alaska that we're seeing from outside of Alaska. Why are people interested? This slide got stolen, I guess, but essentially, size matters. We're not just big in comparison to the lower 48, but the total U.S. economic zone, exclusive economic zone, we're larger than the rest of the area, and so this has got a lot of people's attention, but also additionally, I didn't have a slide on this, but what we've done in the state, and particularly working collaboratively with the governor and actually the previous 2 governors and all of the administration, including all the agency folks that are in the room and people you've heard from today, to improve the permitting and lease application process. That has got a lot of people's attention because in most other places around the world, it's going the other way. It's actually getting harder, and we've worked together to make it better and easier here. So those are 2 major things that people have got other people's attention. People that are interested in either in the room today with us or been a part of some exchange trips that I've been participating in the last couple of years in the lower 48, Washington, California, Maine, Washington, D.C., whether it's folks in the U.S. Department of Energy's ARPA-E agency, but also in other countries, Faroe Islands, Scotland, England, and most recently in South Korea. We'll get to that a little bit later. So I think what's most important to Alaskans is how does this affect us? How can we benefit from this? And, one of the obvious things that maybe I don't need to point out, but I will, we would never have been able to receive some of the most recent funding and support in as far as like capacity increasing with these new positions if it wasn't for this really broad interest and us working with these other places around the world. How it could benefit us is there's potential for having new buyers. Some of these people may end up being new buyers for Alaskans. This was some pictures from a trip to London and Scotland where I viewed some of Oceanium's facilities, and they're working on new product development related to using seaweed for plastics and other things. This is some more pictures from that trip. In the Faroe Islands, Ocean Rainforest has been very, very open with knowledge and showing us both farm techniques. The smaller pictures, it's hard to see, but there's equipment in the background. It's their direct seeding machine. And just, very, very open about processing and other things. There's certain things always that private companies want to keep private, but the sharing has been really helpful, sharing of knowledge. This was a trip in Denmark where Ocean Rainforest is leading an effort on a large grant that they received to look at product development and marketing. And there's not overlap, but a lot of connection and collaboration between the EDA Build Back Better project funded here. And so I was able to participate and learn what they're doing there. So all those things are positive. And then in April of this year, WWF, World Wildlife Fund, is organizing and sponsoring a trip for 18 people to go to Korea to learn more about their seaweed industry. And I'm lucky enough to be one of the ones invited on that trip. There'll be 3 Alaskans. And, we really hope to learn a lot from Korea, and WWF has really laid the groundwork there by developing relationships. And so we hope that we can further those relationships and maybe even bring some Koreans back to Alaska. They've been farming seaweed for hundreds of years, so obviously we could have a lot to learn from them. So anyway, these are just a few of the ways that Alaskans can benefit from these interests from outside our state, and maybe continue to develop long-term relationships with these folks. So, thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Catch you at the break if you have questions. And our last talk to close out this session is from Marcus from Seagrove Kelp Company.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I know this has been a really information-packed session, and so I'm going to bring up the most exciting part, which is the regulatory changes and concepts that we're talking about. So the Alaska Mariculture Alliance, we've set up a committee to focus on what are the regulatory issues that the AMA might be able to promote or assist, and what are the priorities that we have as an organization. Some of the things that that are on the radar. Let's see which way we. Some of the things that are on the radar, as you heard the governor talk about yesterday, the carbon management bill package. It's not clear I don't know that it's really clear as to how that's going to include this this industry and what that'll be, but it's certainly something that's on our radar. We want to continue to learn more about it and figure out some way that whether or not that's something that we want to either take a position on or promote certain issues. Also on our radar is the Working Waterfronts Bill, that's sponsored by Lisa Murkowski. That is a really interesting bill. It's a very broad and encompassing bill. I personally support it. I think it has tremendous potential for the Alaska working waterfront. So I would encourage all of you, if you have the time and interest, to look up that bill and try to see what they're working on and how it may benefit or impact what you guys are doing. So we went in this policy committee, and we encourage all of you to participate in that. Because what is on our radar might not necessarily be what's on your radar. Things that we have, one is funding for the AMA future operations to make sure that the AMA continues to be a viable and constructive part of the mariculture industry, representing the mariculture industry's interests. And pursuing goals that support all of the industries and the individuals that are in the industry and what they're trying to do. Another is, which continues to be a priority for us, and I know for many of you, is making sure that we continue to have funding for PST. One of the components of that is working to get the PST testing as an essential service, so it's not subject to the same kind of variables in that budget process. Another one is that's a priority for us, and I assume for many of you, the lease application fees and rents. The way that is structured is I think that it needs to be examined very closely and some reasonable adjustments made. Future topics that are on our list are the commercial use rule, as we've had quite a bit of conversation about that, and what that looks like. Pre-lease access for site investigations, which is similar to what we talked about in what was discussed yesterday that occurs in Maine, is to have the ability to do some assessments and grow some product on a site to understand the dynamics and whether or not it's going to be suitable for whatever it is that you're doing. Obviously this is a continuing priority for the AMA, is tribal and community outreach during the lease application review, perhaps even putting more structure to that. And at the moment it's really up to the individual applicant to go out and reach out into this community, but how can we do that how can we do that better? And then one which hasn't been a significant issue yet, but it's likely to occur at some point. What is the cleanup of if sites are not utilized, if they're developed, they're not successful, they're not utilized? What does that look like, and how do we make sure that we don't have lots of abandoned gear out in the and make sure that gear is perhaps even recycled into new operations? So those are different policy things that we are looking at. And the duration of the appeal process. We don't really, there's not a lot of structure in that appeal process, and I think it would benefit all the applicants and all the folks to have a defined schedule of what that administrative appeal process looks like, timelines, briefing requirements, maybe a preliminary review process in that can facilitate faster and more predictable resolution of those appeals. Come back again to this question of, if you want to get involved, the AMA policy decision, we want to hear from everybody. We want everyone to be engaged. If there are issues that are on your radar that aren't on ours, please reach out to Jason or Doug or anyone at of the AMA board members, and so we can get that on and participate in the policy committee. We encourage that. This should be for all of us, not for just. So you can reach any of these people at this on these contact information, or any. There's I think there are 12 board members. Certainly, we just elected 5 more. So certainly reach out to any of them. And if you guys have any things that you want to talk about while you're here, reach out to one of us during one of the breaks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think Eric White has a question.
No, I'd like to just add one thing. Good job.
Oh, okay.
I know we've been, talking about the importance of funding and keeping the environmental health lab open, but additionally is our Shellfish Authority. I mean, that's like Carol, who uses the information from the lab to keep us open and able to sell. So there's 2 parts to that. We shouldn't forget.
Thank you, Eric. Great. All right, well, that was a lot of great information in really kind of rapid fire, so thanks for your attention and listening. And I'm going to give you guys 2 sets of directions. We're going to do this slick, or they tell me it's going to be slick, but it's going to be a cooperative effort on all of our parts. We're going to do this slick thing at the break where we're going to flip the room, and that includes your table linen, so don't do anything yet. There's also a science plan here. But what it will mean when I come back to the mic and say it's time to move is that you have to have all your stuff off the table, including your computer, your coffee cup, all that stuff. If you want to put it on your chair, that's okay. So Just make sure you know that it's coming. And I'll give you like 5 minutes to make that move. The back tables, you're going to have to make friends with somebody up at the front tables because that's going to be flipped for lunch. And then we do need this area on the wall clear. So it's going to be a cooperative effort. But before the time to move comes up, I said at the beginning that we would love to hear some feedback on like what do you think the most important kind of research questions are, or what's pressing, what's on your mind. And if you can jot that down on a piece of paper, talk with your group at your table if you'd like. And then Juliana, Jamie, and Robin will come around and collect those pieces of paper, and I will actually read every single one of them. So some science time, and then I'll say time to move. And then if you're not clear, you just have to pack up all your stuff. You can leave it on your chair. Okay, science time. Go for it.